what this was a sign and a wonder.
Absolutely.
By no means was it a full measure. It was only a token. And if this $1 million offering would come supernaturally.
My name is Russ Porcell, and I'm pastor of a local church in Knoxville, Tennessee. You heard Mike Bickle refer to this startling set of events as a sign and a wonder, a token of what was yet to come. Bob Jones, in the experience that he had, was told that this was the beginning of the things that God was going to do regarding Russia and Russian-speaking peoples. I wanted this story to be told by those who were the actual participants in this drama that God orchestrated.
The Lord showed me that He was going to bring over $1 million in one great offering to go into Russia. And that it would be a key time that Russia would need it. And He showed me, He said, I'm going to have a millionaire call you today. Had a garden back there in Kansas City. I always went out and dug in it. And he said, I'm going to start a work that will raise up a beginning of the things what I want to do in Russia. So, I was told to go dig in a place, and I dug up a lot of other articles in my garden out there. And I went out and I dug that day, and I dug up an old toy down about 2 foot. I never dug that deep before, but I was told where to dig. I did, and it was a bus, Eagle Coastline. And so as I dug that up and looking at it, I saw that there was a long bus, and it was a cast iron bus, and I'd never seen anything like it before. It hadn't been, it was only made in one edition. It was 1923, and the bus was still intact. And he said, Noel Alexander and a lot of the other brothers there in Kansas City are going to be keys in this thing. So I dug that bus up, and I was told that I was to give it to Noel Alexander. The Lord is going to give him $1,000 right away, out of nowhere. And the Lord was going to put another thousand with that, which is $1 million. And Viola come outside and said, there's a man who wants to talk to you on the phone. So I went in, and it was John DeLorean.
The car manufacturer?
The car manufacturer. Mm-hmm. And he was calling me up to thank me because I'd give him a prophecy that he thought was really too hard. I told him that he had been ducked 3 times in the Jordan, and the Lord's going to duck him 4 more times. That he'd gone through 3 trials, he's going to go through 4 more. And he didn't like that, but 3 months later, when the 4th trial started, they came to him and told him, said, that man warned you, and he said, oh, that he did. I've only got 3 to go. When John DeLorean went through the last trial, he called me and he said, Bob, I want to thank you for giving me that prophecy. If you hadn't have given it to me, I wouldn't have made it.
Wow.
And the Lord is saying, I am going to begin to finance a really powerful work in Russia.
And back in the late 80s, early one morning, Bob Jones called me, and he just said, I've had a profound experience with the Lord this morning. In the morning when he called me, he said, I saw the bus again today, and there were 7 leaders in the bus, and they were all seated on the right-hand side of the bus, and the driver was obviously on the left-hand side. And the driver's door opens up, and he said, Jesus got out as the driver. And then he said, Bob, I'm going to give you a prophetic understanding right now. And he walked up to me. I was in the bus, and then I'd got out. I was one of the passengers in the bus. And Jesus walked up to me, and he gave me $1,000. And he looked at Bob, and he said to him, I'm giving Noel $1,000. And he said, it's a down payment on $1 million, and it will result in millions of souls. So he said, it's money first, and then it's souls after that. And while he's looking at the bus, the Lord said to him, give the bus to Noel. That's me. So that's why he called me up. And he called me up and then told me the dream of what happened. And he said, I've got the bus here. The Lord said, give you the bus. So he said, I think that you should come over and come and have a look at this. So anyway, probably about 5-6 days later, we had a leadership meeting in a room about this size.
So Bob Jones came into a staff meeting. We had maybe 50 of our leaders together and had this strange, wild, outlandish story. And he had tremendous enthusiasm. He was obviously gripped, because Bob has many prophetic experiences, but normally he tells them in a calm, kind of matter-of-fact way. But he was gripped. He was, oh my, type excited. And it struck me that he was so gripped by this, because even when he has a really intense experience, he's still very matter-of-fact. He's sober about it. It's weighty, but he's not necessarily enthusiastic. He's more reserved, telling it, kind of looking up, but here he was overwhelmed. And he said, the Lord visited me today, and the Lord is going to visit Noel Alexander today, or real soon. We don't know about today, because I'm going to visit him immediately. And so Noel's in the room. There's about 50 of us. And I said, well, what, Bob? He said, the Lord is about to deal and speak concerning Russia. Russia, we were all totally surprised. I go, what? He goes, this is really important to the Lord, and the Lord wants us to have a role in it, because our primary role in the future is in intercession. Although we want to sow money, we want to, send teams, preach and heal and everything. Everybody wants to do all the main works of the kingdom. But he said our main role would be intercession, and that's why we were being brought into this drama, so that the intercessors, not just in Kansas City, but even abroad, would be stirred by this series of events that would be a prophetic sign. It was meant to be miraculous activity, supernatural activity, to be interpreted as a sign and a promise of more to come. It was meant for that. But he was out working his garden, and his clothes were all dirty when he came in, and he said, the Lord gave me a marvelous sign, and he's going to give Noel Alexander a sign, and he's going to involve us in this great drama that God has planned to visit Russia with a great harvest. And so he said the Lord had $1,000, and he turned around and he gave it to Noel and said, Noel, here's $1,000. It's a gift. It's a sign. It's a prophetic sign to you and to this team that I'm going to give you $1,000, which of course is $1 million. And this $1 million is going to signify a down payment of 1 million souls in Russia, which is only a down payment, because 1 million souls is not the full harvest of Russia. I mean, there could be 100 million souls in Russia. I mean, who knows? The number will be vast, way more than 1 million. But he said, this is a token, $1 million, $1,000 will lead to 1 million souls. And this is only a down payment. A vast amount of supernatural miracles in money and supernatural miracles in salvations. They're going to go hand in hand to bring in the great harvest of Russia.
He's in front of the leadership and he begins explaining this. And then when he got to the place where he said that, and Jesus walks up to Noel and he hands him $1,000 as a down payment on $1 million, and then millions of souls as a result of this. And so right at that point, my wife was sitting next to me, and she says, do you realize that we got a $1,000 check yesterday in the mail, paid to the order of Noel R. Alexander from the United States government, exactly $1,000. So I said, let me have the check. She took it out of her purse and I looked at it, and it was a check written to me as a refund from the government, but it was exactly $1,000. And it had come exactly the day before Bob is now retelling the vision. And so, but that it would be exactly $1,000, paid to the order, not 1,001 or 5 or 10, exactly $1,000. So I put up my hand like that, right in the midst of it, and Bob looked over, and I said, Bob, just to say this, just to let all the leadership know here now, I received $1,000 in the mail yesterday from the United States government. And everybody said, whoa, that's incredible. So anyway, I stood up and I took the check and I said, you know what, this is holy unto the Lord. Now, back in 1988, I needed $1,000, like any poor man on the street needed it. But I said, you know what, I can't touch this money. And I said, I want to do a prophetic act right here. And so I took the check and I turned it over and I signed it on the back and I said, I want to just let everybody know in the room that I'm going to take this, I'm going to go and put it in the tithe box, and that's it. And then we'll find out. I said, I'm sowing it. I said, the Lord's giving me $1,000, I'm giving it back to him, you know. And so anyway, I just said, wait a while, and I walked out, and I went and put it in the tithe box outside in the sanctuary, and then came back into the meeting room, and the meeting went on. And
So it's a great story. John DeLorean calls, Bob has the bus, but remember Noel's getting the $1,000. That's and Bob's excitement. Those are the 2 points that excite me, not the John DeLorean and the bus. So I'm going, okay. So we register it. We talk about it a few times. Bob says, you're going to give, Bob Jones, $1 million to Russia. I go, how? He goes, it doesn't matter how. It's supernatural. The whole thing will be supernatural. It's a sign. It's a token. It's to awaken faith. It's to release more. He goes, that's going to happen many times over. All around the world, money will be sent to Russia. He goes, this is just a token. Because if God can do it here, he can do it there. If God can raise up 1 million new converts in Russia, it means he can raise up a million, he can raise up 10 or 100 million if he can do one. It's all a sign. Because Russia at that time, clearly before the Berlin Wall had fallen, clearly before that, there's not a question about that. It did quiet down. It became a story we would refer to every few months at our staff meetings. Hey, you know, we're going to get $1 million to give to Russia one of these days. You never know. But it's not a really important event. It's only 50 of us know about it. The church is 3,000. We don't tell them. It's just kind of, it's not secret. It just doesn't seem worthy to tell them. We don't know how important this is.
The seed was sown, and now a time of waiting took place for the crop, the actual $1 million offering, to take place. It was almost 2 years later, and God moved upon Bob Weiner to call a meeting down in Texas. And in that meeting, Mike Bickle and Terry Law were brought together.
And I called a meeting when the Berlin Wall came down. I called about 35 leaders together. Mike Bickle was in that meeting, Terry Law, and I called that meeting together, and I talked to Mike, and I said, Mike, God spoke to me that you're going to raise $1 million for Bibles for Russia. And I think it was the first month of 1990, when Mike showed up at that meeting, I said, Mike, God is going to use you to release $1 million for Bibles into Russia. Mike told me, he said, well, I was thinking of raising about $8,000 or $9,000 worth of Bible he said, I was thinking about $8,000 or $9,000. I think something like that. Maybe it was 6,000. It was less than 10,000. I said, no, Mike, God is going to use you to raise over $1 million, and I believe Terry Law has something to do with this.
So Bob says, Mike, you and Terry Law need to really connect. Terry's there. I like Terry. I meet him. I instantly like him. I mean, he's got a living faith. He's got deep humility. I said, he's a man of God for sure. I've heard of Terry Law for years, but I go, I like this man. I said, why don't you come and share about Russia? Man, I was stirred. So we can...
So he spoke about Russia.
Oh, that's all Terry spoke about was Russia to everybody. And so I said, come and speak to us in our church and let us take an offering and just bless you, help you get over there. I'm thinking of, give you some plane fare to get back and forth, help you, pay your way so you can go there for a couple months and preach and train leaders. And I said, maybe we can, take an offering, and maybe a substantial offering, who knows, maybe $5,000, $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 to help you come and go to make it easy for you so you can actually get into Russia and do the work of the ministry. And Bob Weiner speaks up and goes, well, 10, 20,000, whatever the number is. What? He goes, give him $1 million. And I look at Bob Weiner, I go, well, that didn't cost you anything to say that. And of course, Bob Weiner's answer would be something like, well, it won't cost you anything either because God will give it to you if you do it. It's not yours, it's God's anyway, He'll give it to you if it's His will. And then I begin to think about, oh my goodness, I've heard this before. I've heard this give Russia $1 million before. And so I think of it in my mind, I'm going, And of course, Bob Weiner doesn't know this.
Right.
And I still don't quite know if this is that. I'm going, you never know.
It was in early 1990. I had just come back from Russia. And in fact, I was ministering. I'd been in a church somewhere in America, and I can't remember the name of the town. But we'd had a healing service. I flew home early Monday morning. I was dead tired when I got home. I remember about probably 11, 12 o'clock in the morning, my phone rang. Bob Weiner was on the phone. And Bob said, Terry, I'm down in Dallas. I've got some leaders of large churches across America. We're in the Hyatt Regency down here at the airport, and they want to find out what God's doing in Russia. Would you be willing to come and talk to them? I said, well, Bob, when do you want me there? I'm a little tired. I've just flown in. He said, can you be here in 2 hours? You know, Bob, he's very impatient.
He's persistent.
Very persistent. And I said, well, let me pray about it. It was going to be a short prayer. Should I, Lord? No, I'm too tired. No, well, can't come. But I knew. I said, give me a couple of minutes. I put the phone down. I prayed, and the Lord said, go. So I called him back. I said, yeah, I'm coming.
Aren't you glad you went?
Yeah. I jumped on I headed for the airport immediately, caught the first flight out of Tulsa into Dallas. A couple hours later, walked into the room. There were a whole host of pastors around the table. There was a man right across the table from me. I found out later his name was Mike Bickle. I didn't know who he was. They asked me to talk, and I spent an hour talking about what God was doing. Of course, the wall had come down in Berlin just before that, and anybody who was strategic was obviously thinking, if the wall's down, what plan has the church got for Russia? And I'd been telling people for 3-4 years, I said, the wall's going to come down. I know the wall's coming down. Prophetically, God had said it. I said, we've got to get ready for it. So anyway, Mike I remember him sitting across the table, just focused on everything I said. And when I was done talking, he got up, came over, shook my hand, and said, we've got a church in Kansas City. Would you come and talk to the elders of our church about Russia? So I said, sure. That's the only invitation I had. So about a month, or 3-4 weeks later, I went down midweek on, I think it was a Wednesday night, to speak to the elders of the fellowship that they had.
This is in Kansas
In
City
Kansas
now.
City. I drove up from Tulsa. I remember there was about, I'd say, 40, 50, 60 men in the room. And when I was done talking on Russia, Mike and I were talking at the front of the building, the front of the room, and this guy came up from the back. I found out later he was a prophet. His name was Bob Jones. I didn't know who he was from Adam. He didn't look like a prophet, and I apologize to Bob if he ever hears this. But and he looked at the pastor and he said, "This is the man we're going to give $1 million to." I looked at him, looked him up and down, and said to myself, "Uh-huh, oh sure." And quite cynical, actually, inside. But Mike's response totally threw me off guard. He said, "Oh, is it Terry?" And Bob said, "Yeah, I saw him in a vision this morning. He's smuggling guns into the North Country." He was speaking metaphorically, because we were smuggling Bibles into Russia. He said, he's smuggling guns into the North Country. I saw him going over the mountains. I saw the Spirit of God going with him. This is the man we're going to give $1 million to. And then Bob explained, he said, we had a prophetic word through Bob Jones here 2 years ago that had 3 parts to it. He said the first 2 parts have been fulfilled perfectly. The third part was giving away $1 million. He said, I guess it must be you. He said, we're going to have a conference here in 2 months, a prophetic conference. Would you be willing to come and talk to the people about Russia? So I said, okay, kind of tentatively.
It seems like now it seems as now it's June-ish. It's about June.
You had a
Because
prophetic
Our
conference.
prophetic conference is in July.
Okay.
It's only a couple weeks after Terry Law visits. It's very soon after. I mean, a week or 2 or 3. It seems like at the most. I can't remember exactly, but it seems real short. And so we get our church together on a Thursday night, which is an odd time to me. We just called it. Just a last-minute calling. And maybe 1,000 people showed up out of the 3. So only about a third of the church showed up. Terry told his story. And I was so stirred by this story as he's telling it. I got up in front of the congregation and said, you know, I don't really know what you guys should do, but I am so stirred. Although I've heard the story now 2 to 3 times with Bob Weiner in Texas, to our leaders privately earlier that couple days earlier that day or the day before, and now to the whole church. And I said, I am going to commit next year's vacation. I said, wait, 2-week vacation? I said, you know, maybe it's $1,000, maybe it's $2,000. I don't know exactly what it makes. I said, I'm going to commit the whole thing my salary that I would get for it and the vacation itself. I'm going to commit it to Russia. I said, think about this. It's the first time I'm saying this. It's just hitting me on the platforms. It's so heavy. Where I'm sitting on the front row, I come up and say this. I go, these men and women are in prison. They've never seen their kids, 5, 10, 20 years, and they've never even touched a Bible. I go, they're in prison. Their whole life is in prison for the last 10, 20, 30 years. They've never seen their families for years and years and years, and they've never seen a Bible. And now the door is open. I go, at least we can do is give up one lousy vacation for the gospel. And I said, I'm going to do it. And so I look at my wife on the front row, and she says, absolutely. I know her. She's just like that. I didn't even ask her. I just said it. I said, next year, we're just going to seek the Lord, can vacation, forget it, and we're doing it. I said, who wants to join me? And a ton of people stood up and came up front. Almost our whole staff did. 50 people, and then 100, 1 or 200 others. Who knows? $200,000. Boom, right there. I went, whoa!
Was given to Russia for
Right then,
Terry
that
Law.
night, to Terry Law. Terry Law, because I was expecting 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 to give Terry to help him on his way. So now it's 200,000. I am blown away. A third of our church is there, not the whole church. I went, I've never seen a $200,000 offering before. Unbelievable. So we got it. But it was because of the vacation thing. That's how come, people were not giving $50. They were giving 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. And the power of it was, of our hearts moved, was Terry's story. We get the 200,000 on that Thursday night. Can't believe it. So now it's a week or 2 or 3 later. I asked Terry Law to come to, we have a conference. We have 8,000 people at it. And Terry Law is coming. We've got all the speakers, so we had to cancel a session and give Terry a main session. Because, it's a 3-day conference, and we got all the guys all signed up already, and they're coming in for one session from all around. I believe Rick Joyner, Jack Deere, John Wimber, Paul Kane. We had all these sessions, and everybody got one, and so we canceled somebody on a Thursday morning and say, Terry, can you come in and just tell the story? Tell the story to 8,000 people what you told our church a week or 2 ago. And Terry, same thing. I don't know if I can make it. I got so much going on. But he says, I will. And so he comes in just for that one day. And he gets up and tells the story. And I don't have even the thought I'm going to do this, to be honest. I don't even remember premeditating this. Because there were so many other things going on that week. And many things going on. And so I got up and I said, there's a prophecy. Well, there's actually 2 of them. And now that you think of it, Bob Jones with this bus and Bob Weiner. But Bob Weiner always sees great, big things. He always sees $1 million. He don't see anything in thousands. Everything's in millions. So, and I said, and they said $1 million. And I said, our church gave 200,000 a week or 2 ago. And then this is what I do spontaneous. I said, you know what? Why don't we do here what we did there? I said, 50 of us, of our leadership, almost our whole staff, and 1 or 200 people in our church have agreed to give their 2 weeks vacation. And I had them all stand. A lot of them were in the meeting. I go, you guys come forward. So they stood up. And I said, who will join them? I just told that same story. I go, join us. These guys are in prison. They haven't seen their families 10, 20, 30 years. They don't even have a Bible. They've never read the Gospel of John once. I go, and the door's opening. And these people were moved in the congregation. And, I don't know the number, but let's just say 1 or 2,000 people stood up. A vast number. You can't count. You don't have any way of knowing. And I said, bring the money forward. I said, I don't know how much is going to come. Of course, Bob Weiner's on the stage. He goes, $1 million's coming, you unbeliever. What do you mean you don't know? Well, Weiner's looking around. What is this? What do you need? Which is true. And so they're bringing money forward. Then Weiner comes up and whispers in my ear. He says, tell them to write pledges if they don't have it right now. I went, yeah, I will bring them pledge. So about 1 million, let's say 1,100,000, 1,080,000. It was 1 million plus, not quite 1.1, came in cash and pledges. There were maybe 10 or 12 tables. It was a big auditorium, 8,000 people, so a big auditorium. 10 or 12 tables around the front. we had in the armed guards, the police, because some of the ushers thought that, hey, this is going to happen. We're going to get $1 million. We better have some security here. I thought that was great insight. I never thought about that. I didn't put any of it together. They have all the tables, and the tables are this full of cash. And you know, just a bunch of tables. I don't know. So the money comes in, maybe 600,000, 700,000, 800,000 in actual cash, 200,000 or 300,000 in pledges. So it comes to 1 million plus a little extra in pledges. And I said within 30 days you have to get it to us. That's the pledge, not like in a year. And by the end of the 30 days, 1.2 million came in. You know, normally you get $1 million of cash in pledge, and you end up only getting about 800,000 of it.
Right.
We didn't get the million that was pledged. We got 1.2 million.
Total.
We got 200,000 more than was pledged from that day. Then we added the 200,000 from our church the week or two earlier.
Yes.
And that's how the $1.4 million total is. That's how we get that number. We call it the offering. It was technically 2 offerings, but it was really technically 2 offerings and then 30 days of people sending in the mail. But that day it really was $1 million plus 10, 20, 30, 40, 50,000 more, or whatever. So it was exactly what the angel told Bob. I was amazed. I was truly amazed because the number was really $1 million. I went, wow! And so we gave it to Terry.
And I had heard about some of the things that was going on in his life, and I'm not even sure why I went there, but I was there. And this one morning they took up this offering. I heard Terry Law speak, and when they took up the offering, I was overwhelmed by they raised $1 million, and I was crying, and I had a small church at the time, and I felt like the Lord said that your worship team is going to go with you to Russia, and you're going to go to Russia. At that time, I'd never been out of the country, and the farthest thing in my life was that, you know, I'm going to get out of the country because I'm starting a very, very small church, just getting it started. We didn't have 50 people yet, and God had just put this worship team together sovereignly. They'd come, and I told them, hey, one of these days we're going to go to Russia, but they just, you know, we just kind of forgot about it. And so but I remembered very clear, it was, I've never heard the audible voice of God, but I know when it's, the internal voice is so loud, it seems like an audible internal voice. And it says, you're going to go to Russia, and you'll take your worship team with you. Oh, and this third thing, and they'll not sing in English.
The point of the $1 million offering was this was a down payment of many more to come. Not just with us. I mean, I expect some more with us, but worldwide. This is, I mean, he's the Lord of the harvest of the nations. He's not, he wants to show forth his power for human beings in the earth. And I mean, when I think of India, Russia, China, vast harvest fields in India and China and Russia, well, the whole world, those are giant harvest fields. So I've never seen another $1 million offering, but that to me is, I'm sad about that. Meaning I'm not saying, I'm not rejoicing over the $1 million and say, isn't that great, we had the one great thing. No, that's not. There's many more to come. And I want to challenge the believers in Europe and the United Kingdom and South Africa, all through Africa, Asia, South America. Let's give money and intercessors, and let's send people to Russia, and let's serve the purpose of God in Israel. And let's see the two together.
It was fascinating to me to hear that Bob Jones was told that this offering was going to be the beginning of the things that God wanted to do in Russia. It should be noted that Randy Clark actually attended that $1 million offering. And it was at that time period in which his heart was turned toward Russia, and God told him he would go. It's further noteworthy to me that when Randy went to Toronto and the Toronto outpouring, the Father's blessing, began, the very first person that Randy laid his hands on was Dan Slade, the precious first of the first fruits of that outpouring. It wasn't long before God sent Dan Slade to Ukraine, where he was a missionary for at least 12 years. God invested the very precious first of the first fruits of this outpouring into helping to prepare the Russian army of God for God's end-time purposes, evangelizing purposes for Russian-speaking people. I believe it is time for the next phase of this set of events to take place, the further preparation of the Russian-speaking people for their end-time calling and reaching 1 billion people for Christ. Would you not be a part? Would you join us as we are seeking to influence Russian-speaking people in Russia and the nations of the former Soviet Union in accepting and stepping into God's end-time calling for them?